That's us. Okay. So, and have y'all got Mary?
Janet, Priest, Susan Davis, Lindsay, me, Mary Poole, for the record, and Jana Vanderbilt and Pat Malley.
Okay, great. Thank you. And there's nobody else on the phone?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. I'm not exactly a whiz at this Skype, so. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read this announcement for the meeting. As soon as I find it here.
Do you want me to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Statement of announcement, a news release announcing the date, time, and place of the July 10th, 2019 Policy Committee meeting was distributed July 8th, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administration Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, and other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you so much. Okay, so if there's no objection, we'll just adopt the agenda by general consensus and do some things that way in that there are two. I don't know that I've ever done this with two, but sounds fun. Okay, so on the first item on the agenda is the employment service standards, which are new standards. And these are standards for individuals in employment services. So there were no comments until page 8. So if we could scroll down to page 8 and look at that one comment. Lori, do you have something overall you want to say about these standards?
No, I don't think so. I had a few like grammatical or punctuation errors that I'd like to fix, but.
Are you on page 4?
Page 4.
There's two sets of employment. One's individual, one's group.
Right.
So the individual is first.
So what am I looking at now? Individual, right?
Individual, yes. And there's a comment on page 4.
Okay, so I was on the wrong standards. Hang on.
It's okay.
It's been a crazy day here. I'll catch up, maybe. Okay, so individual, page 4. Arc of the Midlands asked if the employment goal of the individual plan of supports for employment. I think they were asking if career planning could be billable. Is that the gist of the question? Career planning was.
On page 4 of the standards, the Arc of the Midlands did ask if DDSN can provide an example of general skills training that would be helpful for new providers.
Okay, later on they go into career planning not being billable. So to me it looked like this was career planning, but
it almost sounds like they really weren't making a comment about the actual standard as much as saying, hey, we got new providers, you're going to have to give us some examples of what you're saying here. But that wouldn't be in the standard, that would be in training for new providers, which we do. So
okay, we'll get to it later then as far as the billing part then. So they're saying,
Janet has given good examples in her response of, practicing interviewing skills, learning to use the computer, etc.
Yeah. So they're just saying there's a difference. So were they satisfied with that response? Would you consider that to be resolved?
We would.
We would, because what they didn't question the standard. They just wanted more help in getting it clarified to them for themselves and new providers, which when we go out and do the training, Janet's response would be in that training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other place to put it in documentation? Because not everybody will be in every training every time. Is there any place to put, for example, and list Janet's you know, so that it's somewhere in documentation and we're not just relying on the verbal training.
We can add it here to the standard.
Mhm.
I mean, we could, but in this model section of the standards where it's highlighted, we can put it in there.
So why not then, since there is an answer that has already been articulated in the comments?
Right,
Just-
and we wouldn't repeat the comment, we would just put in there, the expected outcome of
Yeah.
employment services are, there you go. That response. Would that be okay?
The response. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I mean, the more we can clarify for them, the better.
And, you know, the thing about it is, I wanted to just mention this at some point today. These are a lot of standards to give people 15 days to look at, especially the new ones or the substantive ones. So I know we're under time crunches and all that, but there weren't very many comments on anything. And I think that has to do with the time frame, that and a lot going on with case management, now EI, but it seems like we need to give people longer than 15 days when we can. Is that just, we did that because it's historically what we've done? Where'd the 15 days come from, I guess is what I'm asking.
I thought it was the
So-
policy committee.
I'm not exactly sure where it came from. I know that historically we used to give longer than 15 days. And we got no comments because people would receive the draft and they would say, I've got plenty of time, and then they never get back to it. And from what I can understand, as was presented at the time, people felt like having a month to respond was too long, and if they didn't have a shorter time, they wouldn't respond. So then it was converted to 15 days.
Well,
I mean, that can certainly change, but
I wonder, Vicki, this is Susan, I just wonder, in terms of, you know, some of the employment providers, I'm wondering how much they wanted to comment on, simply because a lot of them are already doing this, like, you know, I mean, the amount of people getting jobs in our state is like really growing, and our employment people are really getting good. And most of them are very happy with kind of how this has been rolling out. And we actually, Lynn and I asked to be very open and asked them to be very transparent. We were just in a meeting this morning where they were very transparent with us about what they like and what they'd like
Yeah,
to
I'm
see
not-
different.
okay, let's not spend a lot of time on the job thing, and I understand what you're saying, but we sent out how many sets of standards? 6? I think it were 6 sets of standards. We gave everybody 15 days, and some of them are really significant. So that is we're gonna need to take another look at that, and we'll do that, not today, but when we look at processes. Okay, if everybody will scroll down to page 9. Again,
Where are we at? Barry just got on here about 5 minutes ago because he couldn't get the phone to work, and I still can't get my tab to work. But I'm Barry Melvin, by the way. For those that don't know, I'm the new District 1 commissioner.
hey, Barry.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're
I'm
on-
sorry that I don't know where we are.
We're on agenda item number 4, employment service standards for individuals. And we're on page 9.
Okay.
So we had an ARC question again about case managers may only authorize services based on the following authorization schedule. And they were concerned about career planning not being, are they saying it's not reimbursable, or?
they're saying that the technical guidance from CMS allows states to offer career planning as part of the supported employment individualized services, but they don't see that it's part of what is outlined in the standards. And they are requesting that DDSN consider allowing supported employment providers to offer this service, and we're certainly happy to do that.
And this is where I got confused. Well, I've been confused on a lot of things, but on this one, it looks like what we're calling vocational services is career planning to me. But are they concerned that you're not billing for it in units, or that they're not allowed to bill for it in units?
I think, Vicki, this is Lynn. I think that what we're trying to get away from is we're trying to make sure that the services that are provided in employment individual are actually geared towards a job, and they're not general kinds of skill development that you would do in career prep. Because career prep services is more going out and discovering what people can do and what they're interested in and that sort of thing. And the employment individual is billed at such a high reimbursement rate that we have to make sure that the services that are provided are appropriate, and they're not career prep services being provided just an individual, because it's really is a different service.
So is it an allowable CMS expense?
Under career prep it is, that's where we do this. You know, and to your other question, even though the standard says new, this was always part of the day program standards where we had all the services listed out. And because of with new providers doing individual employment, we saw that request for hours, a typical job coach would ask for maybe 30 or 40 hours in a year to do everything. These new providers were asking for 700 and 800 hours a year. So we saw that there was definitely a problem in the service with understanding what it actually was. When you get to employment for individual, this is where you're actually, this person is ready to go out on their job interviews. They're doing all this stuff. They've done all the prep work ahead of time. That's career prep.
So you're thinking that career prep is more billable for day programs?
No. I mean, it's a service as a day program service. It's called career prep. So these folks can go through the process to be a career prep provider, but they have to bill at that career prep rate. You don't just sit around and talk about your career at a $70 an hour rate versus the $22 a unit rate for career prep. So
Well, you don't want to, when you say you'll consider it, does that mean you're going to go back in and look at some point at how you can define that in a way that you get the outcomes you need to get?
I think what we're going to consider is look at how it's defined in our other, in our day program process to make sure that it's well defined, and to also help somebody like the Arc of the Midlands become a provider of that service. Because they're not, they're just a job coach provider.
They're just an
employment
individual,
provider.
Right.
Mhm.
So they need to understand that the stuff they think they're doing in individual employment is really career prep. How do we help you become a provider of career prep?
Okay.
The ability to do that is there. It's already there.
Mhm.
It's just
Okay.
not this service.
The difference is that career prep has to be provided, it has to originate from a licensed facility, whereas employment individual does not.
Okay.
And like Arc of
So-
the Midlands does not have a licensed facility.
So if we want to look at our standards to see if we can help get more providers to do that service, we would have to look at that language. But that's not this standard. It's a different service.
Okay. So you're just going to keep that in mind when you look at the other services?
Sure.
So ARC, going down to page 10, can DDSN provide a policy or directive that supports or clarifies the statement? Traditional support employment strategies are supported as the model for DDSN employment services. Is that what we don't understand why DDSN would make a client go the traditional route and fail. Especially if we know that if we know that right away we can justify customized employment strategy. So that's kind of the reverse. Now we're still going beyond the career planning and we're going right to it, right to the job at hand.
Well,
I'm not sure what they want us to do.
customized employment is a new thing, so to speak, a new trend, I guess, in employment services for people with disabilities. For about 85% of the population, the traditional employment services like we're describing in these standards are effective. But for about 15% of the population who have very significant disabilities, employment is most successful when you used a customized employment strategy. But a customized employment strategy is very detailed, it's very labor intensive, and it's very expensive. So the point that DDSN is trying to make is that when it's required for that 15% of the people, you can do customized employment, but you have to demonstrate the need for that customization and not just skip to it. And part of the thought behind that was many people who get employment services individual are enrolled in the community sports waiver. That waiver has an annual cost cap. Customized employment would eat up all of that cost cap in a portion of the year, leaving the person with nothing but a little bit of customized employment this year and having to wait till the next to get the remainder of it. Or they would have to move to a different waiver. So we recognize that customized employment is necessary for some people, but we want to make sure that it is reserved for those people who truly need it because the traditional model didn't work.
In what way do we make sure of that?
You want to try the
Is that you, Barry? Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying you need to try the traditional model first. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
And just to make it,
Why don't we put that, can we put that in here?
But I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of fail first in the traditional model. I think the provider ought to be able to ascertain on a client that they serve whether the traditional model is likely to work or a customized model is necessary. I don't disagree with what you said, that traditional probably works most of the time, but providers who know their clients ought to be able to make that determination without putting them through, in my opinion, a traditional program and wasting that time.
Lori, this is Susan.
It's not about failure. It's just about trying something, and then if something don't work, you try something else. I mean, that's about, I mean, I'm a disabled person, and I've known that all my life. You try certain things, you try something else. It's not about failure. You're just trying to get to the next thing that benefits them the most. But anyway.
I was just going to comment that what I think this term, like when I started doing employment, because I'm old and crotchety, there weren't all these terms. It was if somebody would like if somebody would like a job, you find out what they're passionate about, what their family feels like they would be successful in, and you try to find something that's going to match them. Okay, we didn't have terms like employment first, customized, discover, whatever. We just listened to them and got them a job. Which you've been to my training, you know I'm very focused on, you know, what does a person want to do? How can we best support them? What can we do to make that's customized? But what they've done is they've taken that one term, customized employment, and made it seem like it's not traditional employment. It is traditional employment. It's just really what customized means is there's no way we can help that person. Absolutely no way, and they have to go through 50 to 60 hours of the discovery process. My philosophy is try to help them learn as best you can, and then if you meet a barrier, then go back to the drawing board and try to feel out where you can make an improvement. Not say no, but try to customize it from get-go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I understand that. I just want to make sure that the ARC of the Midlands seems to be concerned that they're being directed by the state in a particular way. And I guess that goes back to the question I was trying to ask a minute ago, and when I stopped talking, and that was, in what way are we dictating that in what way do we direct what services they use? a provider utilizes for a
So
client.
we do have, we used to have back in the olden days, but we had assessments. Do we not still have assessments? that
yeah.
are-
They're
We
done
do.
a little different though. We're not assessing if someone's ready for employment. We're assessing the skills they have that could be used towards employment.
Yeah, maybe we should think about doing that though. Because because it looks like there should be some kind of guidelines, when you go one direction versus the other. Because what Lori's, what Barry's saying, if the opportunity's there, that's,
This standard is basically
Want to
saying,
give people
look,
an opportunity anytime you can.
this standard is saying, traditionally, this is what, over the course of all these years, we have seen that this is how many units you require to basically get folks jobs. This has been the formula all along. And it's not been written down like this, because it's just what we have traditionally always been able to do. Again, with the influx of a whole bunch of new providers, and you should notice that a lot of these comments are from the same provider, that we're getting, well, now we need to do all these other things for this person, and that's fine. If the justification is there, the additional units would be allowed.
Right.
This allows that. What this thing is saying is, we're seeing that for most of the folks, this is the formula that's working. This is the amount of units you need. But for case managers, the guidance to you is, if this person requires something above and beyond this, there is a way of getting there, and you have to have the justification to do that. And then it would get through the process. It's just allowing for another level that what we don't want to do is say you can only have 5 units, 70 units, 30 units. We're saying that there are some people that are going to need more than that.
Mhm.
And this standard allows for that mechanism to kick in to where we can authorize additional units above that. That's really what this is for. It's laying that
I
extra
guess what I'm
level.
asking is, what is that justification? Like you said, if they justify the need for more, it'll be granted. To justify it, do they have to show that they've already been through a particular program and it didn't work?
Not necessarily. If they're showing this person needs a lot of additional supports. It could be the addition of a jig or that's too simple. Some people actually need a person there with them all the time. A jig is too easy. That is traditional. That is very traditional, actually. I went right to.
Sometimes micro enterprises, if you have somebody who has, I worked with someone years ago that had almost like a Lou Gehrig's disease for a child. And so, very sad. She was very capable, and obviously she would have good weeks and then she'd have really bad weeks. And so we had to come up with what was something that she still wanted to work. She still wanted to do that. What was a job that she could do that maybe she could be her own boss, that would provide her the flexibility to be able to work when she wanted to work, but not restrictive when she couldn't work. Okay, so it was a very specific kind of a situation to provide her supports, and obviously everybody on the team is fully aware of her challenges and the heartbreak of the situation and is going to work to make it ready. That being said, there were a lot more people that I had to job carve or negotiate a position, but that's traditional job development.
Basically, no, Lori, they don't have to fail first, but this is kind of forcing the provider to make the case up front instead of saying, oh yeah, to serve this person, I need 800 units.
Right.
Just give me the units. What we'll say is, well, you need to justify why you need those 800 units. That's basically what it's saying.
Okay.
It's accountability.
And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I think, the question that was posed is, it reads as if we are limiting customized employment to those that try and fail traditional methods. So if the answer to that is, no, we aren't, then that's the answer and no modification is needed.
okay, so what we could do, Lori, is go back and try to
Last paragraph.
be more specific about that language, or we can pass as is.
Well, the
Whichever.
last
I think
paragraph, can you read that last paragraph? It just says it needs to be in-depth discovery. It's telling them we need more than just what you would do in a traditional setting. So if you need additional assessments or additional documentation, that last paragraph pretty much says that. If that needs to be clarified, we can do that.
So Lori, what do you think?
Hey, let me read that last paragraph again. The need for formal customized employment, including but not limited to in-depth discovery, can only be demonstrated when the traditional supported employment model has been appropriately implemented and demonstrated to be ineffective for the person.
That last paragraph needs to be reworded because that's where they're getting that failure thing.
That's right.
What we need to say is that additional documentation needs to be included with the request.
Yeah.
Okay?
And Susan, I think that's right, Mary.
Okay.
Susan, I am completely in tune with and sympathetic to your comments that there are all these names for practices, these newfangled names for practices that good employment support folks have been using forever, and that it complicates matters. But if it's billed at different rates and I get that GDSN needs additional justification if these practices, when called customized employment, are billed at different rates or authorized at different levels.
Well, and just to add one more layer on this, because I was just at APSI and you've been at APSI like 2 weeks ago, so I kind of know what's happening, what's working, what's not working across the country. And just to add another layer of confusion, there is a specific model called discovery. It's a specific way that you sit and actually try to discover how to assist someone. And sometimes we've had in the past providers, and honestly, sometimes they're not they're qualified providers, rather than board providers. That sometimes take the strategy that if they run somebody through all kinds of different jobs, that we're going to figure out what they want to do. And, we're going to spend a week here, and then we're going to go to the farm and spend a week, and then we're going to spend a week at Kohl's, and that is not actually based on APSI or anyone that knows anything about discovery. That's not really the discovery model. It sounds like discovery, but I just want to make sure that we're not just wasting somebody's time taking them to a greenhouse when they have allergies, which we could learn up front.
And that's through traditional methods.
Right.
So.
Okay, so let me,
We just need to reword that paragraph so people know that they got to do the legwork up front to prove that they need these units. If we don't put some, I call them governors. If we don't put some governors on definitions, what happens is that new folks that are in the system just right away ask for the top number. And basically what they're asking for is almost that complete band, if not more, which puts this individual at risk of losing services for half the year. So
do you need more time to reword that paragraph? Because it's 1 o'clock. It's been 30 minutes. We're on the individual employment standards, and I have another meeting at 2. So for sure, we got to move forward a little bit if we can. So if we're not ready to reword this concern, then let's just
table it till next time.
right.
okay.
Just table this whole individual employment until next time. And if we got other ones to go through, and we got that to fix, and it needs, and
Because we're just not ready right now to resolve that. I understand what everybody said. I understand, Mary, what you're saying about putting some conditions,
Yeah.
but I also understand what the commissioners are saying about making sure that we don't miss opportunities and making sure that they don't have to have failed before they can go to the next step. So, okay, let's just go ahead and pass on that one and take that back and fix that little glitch.
Okay.
And then the next standards are the employment standards for group. So if we can, let's look at those. And now this one, we go to page 8, which is our first comment. Unless anybody has any comments they want to make about the ones before that. So in this one, HHS asked about psychological evaluations. And this one is resolved because it was pointed out by DDSN that individual settings are licensed by the state and psychological evaluations are received. I think that was the gist. And then on number 9, page 9, Charles Lee Center asked, will the individual plan also be, I guess that's what IPSE stands for,
Yeah.
also be required to be used by EG, which is, what is EG?
Employment group.
Employment group.
Or will some type of revision be made to the current plan to include a preliminary plan? And our response was that a separate document for preliminary planning will be provided. So has that been provided, or are we working on that? Is it attached to this policy? Where are we on that?
It's been out there, so they don't have to do anything differently.
This is not a new standard. We've always had to have a preliminary plan before someone walked in the door for services, because how would you know what medicines to give if there was medicines, what supervision level? This has always been in the standard. This is not new.
Well, we said a separate document for preliminary planning will be provided in our response.
All right,
Have we done that?
we have currently right now with day services that include employment group, they use a plan and the first page of that plan is typically used as the preliminary plan.
So it's already out there. I don't know why we said we will be used, because it's already there.
Well, because the reason is the planning document, if these standards are adopted, will be a little different. The IPSI is used in individual, and we have a group IPSI that will be used.
Which is called the gypsy.
It's just called the gypsy.
All right, we can, without changing the standards, could you tweak that response a little bit so it doesn't look like we said we were going to do something that we're not doing?
Actually, the person that sent this in called us last week. And so they understand that we're not changing. I mean, Jennifer Pitts, I think, posed the question.
Mhm.
She did call us, and then when we said, she goes, oh, I'm sorry, I should have known you would have, that was the same thing.
Well, my
So-
concern is that other people are going to see this response and
Okay.
may be looking for a separate document, so if you just fix that. Okay, on number 10, Charles Lee Center asked a question and it was resolved. So it was just a yes question. On the next one, HHS suggested that we had, if applicable, to have let me read this sentence. It says, or part of it, with participation from the individual and or her legal guardian, if applicable. On number 22, if applicable is in red. Should this not say his or her personal representative? Should we not get in sync with what we're doing with the ADA and the Adult Health Care Consent Act, and everything is moving? We had all this problem about if you haven't obtained legal guardianship, you still want your personal representative or your parent to participate. So HHS wanted to add if applicable, but I think it should say or personal representative.
Do you want to put if applicable after personal representative too?
And or his or her legal guardian or personal representative.
If applicable. That's what HHS is saying needs to be in there.
You can put if applicable past legal guardian. After legal guardian.
So you make
if
a personal representative a requirement on the plan.
Well, we don't need to do that. Just put legal guardian and personal representative in if applicable. Why not, Pat?
Yeah.
Aren't they required to participate in all the other plans, like in residential and different things?
If there is a legal guardian or personal representative, and I think that's the question, sometimes there's not.
Yeah.
So there's an if applicable.
What they do, what we do is, then the executive director or staff member becomes the personal representative, but it doesn't, we're talking about jobs here. I just don't want to leave any families out. because we're gonna have a problem if we do that.
Could you write with participation from the individual and/or any legal guardian? I mean, just,
No, because it's, all family members are not legal guardians. If they've not been adjudicated, then they're not legal guardians. They're just a mother or a father.
right, no, I get that. I must have missed just a moment of what we were trying to accomplish here.
I just don't want to leave out the families in the planning.
Well, in terms of training,
Doesn't one person have to be in charge of the planning though?
You know, I can settle with legal guardian or personal representative if applicable, if that will.
Because that'll allow the person to say if they really want to, say, I don't want my mom in here. And some people say it, very, very few.
Yeah,
But they
I
should
think-
have the right to do that.
Yeah.
well, and in the other standards, what we've put, unless the person says they don't want them in there. They'll be participating unless the person decides they don't want them in there. So I'm trying to be, at some point in time, we need a little consistency in what we're doing and how we approach this personal representative issue. So I think that'll work for now, and we can always come back to it. I don't think it's a reason to hold anything up.
All right, gotcha.
So this next one is, you know, we're saying documentation will be in therapy, but the plan won't be in therapy, and I'm not following that. Can somebody explain
The
that?
actual planning document is an IPSI. It's not something that's compatible with TheraP. It would be something that would be uploaded into TheraP.
attachment.
But the the day-to-day documentation of what's being done at each contact will be written in an ISP that is in TheraP. But the planning document itself stands alone and would just be uploaded.
Is there any hope that one day we might have an integration?
We hope so. We
Yeah.
got a long way to go with TheraP for that, just because of the way our state is set up so differently than other states. The TheraP modules mimic how VR contracts with providers, and that does not happen here.
Okay, but they can scan in and.
Yes, it'll be
Oh, yeah, it's-
available.
Yeah, it's getting better all the time.
But your individual data, how many hours, and the training objectives, all that is in
Yes.
there.
Okay. So on page number 12, Charles Lee Center asked, what will the wages be like if they're making minimum wage or higher? And it was answered, and that everybody has to report all the wages. So that was a question asked and answered. In the next page on 13, it was another question from Charles Lee asked and answered and resolved. It looks as if it was resolved because the log basically is all the documentation that they're going to need.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that's good. And that's the last comment on this set of standards. So if there are any other comments or changes on this one?
I just wanted to ask about on page 14, does it say that the employer, I'm new to this, so please bear with me, but does it say that an employer is required to give an exit interview? Because some employers may not want to give an exit interview, and I don't think they have to. They should have to if they don't want to.
The exit interview is when the person wants to leave service. It has nothing to do with the employer.
It's when
That's-
somebody
Okay, all right.
chooses, like, they don't want to have group employment as their service any longer, and they don't want those supports. They may be moving to another county, or they're retiring, or whatever. It's just in order for the support staff to know how to support them.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that we don't make it any harder on employers to.
Oh, no,
to
it's not,
deal
it
with this.
doesn't
This
have
is my
anything,
most-
it's not,
This is my most interesting part of this whole thing is making sure that people get as many we get as many people out employed as we can. Anyway, go ahead, moving on.
amen.
Okay, so, Lori, unless you have a problem with it, can we agree to these by general consensus with that one change?
Yeah, we can, but do I still have an opportunity to make punctuation
Yes, you
corrections? Do you want us to do that now, or can I just edit it and send it back.
You can edit and send it to us if you'd like.
Okay. I mean, I've got a number of them marked, but it doesn't seem like a good use of our time to kind of go through my
You can
semicolon
just
list.
send those in, well, I guess, yeah, can we do it that way?
Yeah.
You just send them in, we can make the corrections?
Okay.
That's
You
what
know,
she
the
said,
bigger
yeah.
issue is, the fact that the group individual standards and the group, the employment standards group and the employment standards individuals used to be one set of standards,
Currently.
and we're pulling them apart. Now we're going to approve one without approving the other. That is a little bit of an issue. We're not approving, we're not approving the individual standards for employment, but we're approving the group standards for employment. That leaves us with a little
Can we
bit of a
approve it?
dilemma.
I mean, it's just one paragraph that needs to be fixed, right? I wonder if
Right.
that can be fixed quickly and we can
Right.
approve it by email.
Right,
Or we could just, if we could fix it now, we could approve it now, but I mean,
yeah.
I think all we need to add at that, and it's like, I'll give you just additional information is required if requesting customized employment prior to initiating traditional employment methods. How's that?
That works for me. Is somebody writing?
Yeah, Susan's writing.
Okay.
that sounds good to me, I think.
Additional information provided to DDSN.
Yes, well, the case manager will have to review additional information because it's actually the case manager who's going to say this is what is needed.
Okay, so
Yeah.
additional information provided to,
Justify the need for custom employment versus traditional employment.
to the case manager?
Yes,
Okay,
this whole thing is guidance for actually putting this on the plan. So the person that writes their budget is the case manager. Now, it will come here. And if we review it and say, well, they didn't provide the right information, it might be denied pending additional information. We just want to
Okay.
give them a heads up.
Right, it could be that anytime, yeah.
Mhm.
all right,
Good to
we're
know.
doing good now, that's two. We got two passed, woohoo,
Woo,
okay.
bless you.
No, we didn't finish it.
I was gonna
You
say,
didn't
we
finish this one.
didn't go through the whole individual.
Yeah, you still got, we
Stop
got
at page
stuck on that
10.
paragraph, but we didn't finish page 11.
Wait a minute, hang on, what are we on the group?
No,
Yeah, we're on the group
individual,
again.
page 10, now 11.
I thought we did.
No, we didn't do the whole thing. We kind of got stuck on page 10.
And we stopped.
Yeah, we did, I said, question answered and resolved. Charles Lee Center questions, is that what you're talking
No,
about?
no, ma'am, going back to the, I think that the group standards are done.
All right,
Yeah.
what are we on?
We're going back to the individual employment standards where we stopped on that paragraph we got stuck on. That really isn't that hard to fix.
Well, I thought we went on and finished the rest of them, did we not?
No, ma'am, we didn't. We stopped. We're on page 11. I think somewhere along the line, Vicki, we might want to start talking about what is an actual comment about the directive versus a question about the directive that needs to be answered in training. You see, there's two kinds of comments we're getting.
Well, we're doing that as much as we can, like resolve, but there are things I'm bringing out that I think we need to probably run by and discuss. Anyway, so we crossed out that paragraph and changed the writing on page 10.
We
Yeah,
just added a sentence
So-
to it, right?
So under 11, we're back to that same discussion about, we talked about this, about matching the abilities, interests, and preferences of the job seeker.
yeah. Yep,
We don't determine that someone's not ready. If they're working age and want employment, they're ready. We just gotta find where they fit.
All right, and page 14 was the ARC commented, they take out needed and put in, they just take out needed. They just wanted more clarity, so y'all took out needed and that was resolved.
yeah,
And then on page 15, you said the ARC said it was confusing, so y'all resolved it and,
rewrote it,
I'm on page 15.
yeah.
And so that was resolved. So that basically is it.
Okay.
There were no other comments.
Wait a minute, can we go back? Did we, back on page 10, Did we just add a sentence or did we replace the sentence?
We're adding a sentence.
We took out, and that's a good question, Lori. I was under the assumption we took out that paragraph that says the need for formal customized employment,
Right,
including.
I was too. But then I just heard Mary say we're just adding a sentence. So if we just add a sentence and leave that sentence there, then I think we've got two conflicting sentences.
Okay, all right. I got you.
Okay.
We'll just put a clarifying sentence, take that paragraph out, put a clarifying sentence after it's over saying additional information will be required to.
We'll splice it together really so that it doesn't say that you have to fail to get additional. You just have to explain why you need
it.
additional.
You get all
That's
this
right.
thing.
That's right. I think we are all on the same page.
Yeah.
All right. But
Yeah.
before you vote on it in the commission meeting, we'll go ahead and have that paragraph sent to you, probably by the end of the day, okay?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to day service licensing. And these are called substantive changes in these standards. So on page 2, really we're just taking out the word sheltered workshop because it's no longer used. So that one would be resolved. Same thing with page 3, it was taken out. Same thing with 4. On page 5, it is talking about each facility shall afford each participant adequate space for privacy. And in C, it says lockable storage for participants' personal belongings. And I just had a question about that because you're talking about lockers, I assume?
Some way to secure personal belongings.
So is there going to be a cost to that?
There could be if you have nothing for them to lock their stuff up in, yeah.
And I don't think
So-
we're asking for each participant to have their own locker.
Not everyone wants to lock their stuff up. They just have to have the option to lock
To
their
lock it
stuff.
up. And most people don't even come with personal
They
stuff.
don't bring
Oh,
stuff,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
And a lot of them that do bring stuff want to keep it on them too.
right.
So
you just have to have an option for them to do that.
a place where it can be locked up.
I don't know that that's clear, but
Yeah, it says shall afford people to do that. That is, I hate to say it, but it is a requirement now with the final rule, and, you know, I know that we were buying lockers like a year and a half ago, so the opportunity, that should have already been met by most folks by now. So, but yeah, they need to be able to have a private place to put their stuff. Not a bad idea for staff to have a nice place to lock their stuff up too, so pocketbooks don't get gone.
no, I agree with you. I just think, you know how you, Mary, have always complained about unfunded mandates.
Well, this is not a new mandate.
Well, it kind of is. It's a standard and it's changed and there it is. It says lockable storage for participants' personal belongings and it's in yellow, so I'm assuming it's new. And then there were 4.
Yeah, it's for
CMS
the,
new.
it's for CMS, it's new, but it, you know, I mean, a lot of folks have already met that. Yep,
Okay.
something's gotta be in there.
If we don't
That's
think
for
it's
the
a
county
problem.
boards anyways. I mean, if they have to do it, they have to do it. Tell them they have to do it.
And it's anybody with a day program, so there's some private, are there any private providers of day programs? I think there are. They have to do it too. So, and people that are doing adult day healthcare, they gotta have it too. All those places have to have it.
Let's make sure that Alliant doesn't go in and cite somebody because they don't have individual lockers for everybody.
Because they have till 2022 to be compliant. Well, actually, no, they need to be compliant before that, so we don't do heightened scrutiny on them. We'll get them their lockers. They gotta figure that out. Yep,
Okay.
it's not a huge expense.
Well,
I wouldn't have complained about this one, Vicki, as a provider. I didn't, I already bought them. They're already there.
so, this next one. The facilities licensed on or after July 1st, 2019 The setting must be free from qualities that may be presumed institutional. So,
It's if we license any new facilities. I don't think
are we,
licensing
new day,
New day
uh,
programs.
new day programs, so,
Although you're gonna see the same standard, really, for all practical purposes, as in the residential, because that's what it says in the law, in the regulation. So we're just taking that regulation and putting it here. So if you've got a new facility, please don't build it inside a hospital or a nursing home. If you have if you're opening a new day program, do not put it next to a publicly funded institution. We can't license that. So the good news is that if someone's planning on building something, we would be talking to them about all this before that ever got to that point. It's like, don't put it there. We can't license it for you.
yeah, I don't think our problem is gonna be necessarily
Day program.
day program with no. But, okay, so 13 is for facilities initially licensed after July 19, the setting must be free from characteristics that have the effect of discouraging integration. And Oconee DSN commented, why is our, I guess that's day program, being looked at for heightened security? And I think what y'all are saying is that basically arrangements are going to be made for existing.
They have to write the cap plan for them and mitigate.
Because, I mean, nobody's going to fund building another day program in Oconee, so.
And it's not really a thing people are doing. It's like ICFs. No one's building a new ICF, you know?
Right.
What,
So, I mean, I just want to point out that, you know, I'm not sure about this fence thing. Settings completely enclosed by walls and fences with locked gates. Because a lot of the day programs do have a lot of expensive contract work going on in there.
Sure, but mostly those would be locked after hours.
Mhm.
You don't lock them during the day when the people are there working. And that's what you write in your plan. We have a fence, but we don't want our copper wire being stolen after 5 o'clock. So we're gonna lock our vans in the fence.
You know what though, Mary? Borg Warner locks their fence all day and has a security guard in front of it. So I'm just saying, Borg Warner,
Who's Board Warner?
it's a plant. So there are a lot of
Yeah, but they don't
plants.
get Medicaid funds for having
Right,
people included in the community. It's not really apples and oranges there. I mean, it is apples and oranges. Sorry, that was a totally bad metaphor.
Or bananas.
Yeah, and it's a private company not accepting public funds that are under regulations. And we're unfortunately, this is not, for fortunate or unfortunate, how you look at it, we're under that regulation. But for those facilities, like Jerry's right, they're built in the 70s. This wasn't the standard then. So we have to
I
figure out.
don't think that day program over there has a fence around it. So I'm not real concerned about that. What I'm more concerned about is that there are some day programs that we have that need fences.
Right. And we do, and there are, actually, there's quite a few day programs that have fences, because that's where they keep their vans in the evenings, but during the day, they're not locked, and that's all you need to say.
Mhm.
What they're saying here is, oh my God, you've got a big fence, tell me how this is not institutional. It's not institutional because it's only there for security in the evenings. It's not locked during the day. It's mitigated, it's done. That's all you have to say.
Right. Yeah, good.
Okay.
It's not institutional. That's just because it's a fence. It's not institutional.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
But then also, we don't want our vans stolen, so.
No, you don't. You can't have. You got to have fences for that reason.
Yeah, so a lot of places have fences.
Okay, so on page 7, DSN Quality Management recommended clarifications to the state fire marshal's role. Are they just spelling out what the fire marshal's going to do?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, probably a good idea. So that's resolved. And then DSN Quality Management recommended clarification, immediate corrective action when there's a lack of egress or there's obstruction. All of those appear to be resolved in common sense. Most of the inspection must be present on site. Okay, and that also is common. sorry. Page 11, stop me, Lori or Barry, if I'm going too fast. DDSN Quality Management recommended this clarification, which is 90 days. And we're gonna have people driving around with people in the vans without taking defensive driving for 90 days. Can we not do some kind of a webinar or something and get that done quicker?
Hmm.
I mean, it's really not, I mean,
We usually do it like right away in orientation. I didn't know there was
I don't-
90-day grace period on that.
I think this is new.
It says
Not
30
to
days,
exceed
but
90
but
days
up to
from
90 if they don't have an option.
Yeah, well, you
Well,
can,
Karen-
you're right, you can get it online. Defensive driving is available online. So there really should not be an option.
90
What you
days is a long time. What can we do to fix that?
Why don't you say they get it online if they can't get it within 30 days?
There's no course offered within the first month. Has to be verified.
If you verify, the staff must take and pass the first course offered, not to exceed.
Okay, let me ask you this question.
I would say
Yeah,
not to
right-
exceed
right-
30 days, but that's
Right
just me.
now, Mary, let me ask you this. Right now, in a day program, can somebody drive people around in a van without having taken defensive driving?
I can tell you, see, I think that it goes back to the provider. In York, no, they're not allowed to use an agency vehicle at all without taking defensive driving.
Okay.
So because it's offered within the first orientation there, and most places it's offered in an orientation. I'm having a little trouble with this too. You're not allowed to drive a vehicle in York, including the executive director, until you have defensive driving.
Do y'all need time to go back and hash this out?
No.
We can delete it.
We can
No,
delete
just say,
it. I
say
want
they
to
have to
delete
do it
it.
within the
I
first
want
month.
to take it off. No, I have no problems with this.
All right, so we're going to X that one out. And we're going to say must pass the first course offered. So that still doesn't tell me who's driving around without having had it.
Vehicle
With
operators-
people in the van.
Why are we saying that people who operate vans and license must have, prior to operating a van with individuals in it, the person must have defensive driving? That's how I would word it.
I like it, but is there going to be an uproar? I don't know.
Well, let it be an uproar. Just tell them they have to do it.
It's in our orientation.
I mean,
It's
if we're
in
so
the list of
concerned about it, let's
orientation
just tell them they have to do it.
I mean, personally, I don't think they should be, but I also know what the turnover rates are everywhere. Is it doable? I guess what I'm saying is, are people going to be able to get to the day program if we pass this?
Yeah, because you go online and get it in 4 hours.
Okay, I mean,
to me, if I have to pay for the insurance on these vehicles, that's one of the things that keeps your rate low.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's up to
Yeah,
the
really.
policy committee ultimately, but if I'm looking at it, I'm like going, you can't
Okay.
transport individuals without having defensive driving.
what's our new wording? Let's word it.
How about vehicle operators who transport individuals shall be licensed drivers and shall have a current defensive driving course, shall complete a current.
Shall complete and have a current defensing driving course certificate prior to.
Transporting individuals on agency vehicles.
Okay, and if y'all will email that change out also, that'd be great. Okay, moving on. That's all I have on that. Anybody have any problems with any of that, other than that?
I'm fine.
Okay.
And staff is good? Staff is all good with it?
Yes.
We're good.
Okay. Residential rehabilitation standards, substantive. Lord help me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so we are I am scrolling down to page 6. And I'm looking at the CIRS replacing cloud, the word cloud, I guess.
Correct.
And I see SLP 1 and SLP 2 and CRCFs. Where's SLP 3? We have at least two providers we contract with SLP 3. Do we have standards for SLP 3?
We do not.
How do we survey them and license them without standards?
I don't know how the homes are licensed.
I think probably SLP2.
That would be
And
my
then with
guess.
additional, it's probably a funding issue.
think it's a
That
funding.
gives additional monies for staff. I think the only person that has SLP3 is Oconee.
No, I saw an SLP 3 contract in what we passed somewhere else. I don't remember the county though. I can-
You know, because
I
I know
can
what
look
the
it up.
model is. The model is basically additional staffing because those individuals need a little bit more support. And your ratio is probably lower, but that is really the only difference between SLP2 and the SLP3.
Well, I don't have a problem moving on with these, but at some point in time, if you're gonna pay for a program, you need to have standards.
Well,
And you need,
you know, we pay different rates for high management CTH2s and there's not different standards for those.
well, but Mary, if you're going to, how are you gonna survey people?
No, I agree. It's not that I don't agree with you, but I'm just saying right now, currently, we don't have those either. That is something that when I talk about expectations for those high management dollars, that's what we need to build. DDSN has been doing this for years this way. So I think that's why you don't see SLP3 standards.
Well, I'm gonna have to continue to point these things out because you need to come up with some. And then you need to survey based on them. So we're missing that piece and we need to get on that. Okay, so on page 8, HHS asked if the standards was moved to the case management standards. And I don't see a response here, but
I left out the response. The response is that the standard was not specifically moved to the waiver case management standards, but the waiver case management standards do address offering choice based on the needs and preferences of the person.
That's already in those standards.
okay.
So I guess
Moving
the response
on,
would be it's already in that standard.
but we're going to consider that resolved.
Mhm.
Okay, page 9, Oconee DSN is concerned that we're having people sign leases. And the response is final rule setting. Because I looked at that CFR 44.31, some of the things that we're putting in here are not in there. But I don't remember if leases were in there or not. I guess my concern on having everybody sign a lease is it legally enforceable?
If a person hasn't been adjudicated and competent, they are allowed to sign. If it came to court, I don't know. The judge might say this person didn't understand what they signed and it would be thrown out. We've never thrown anybody out of a facility, even if they trashed the place.
Yeah.
So, this is a final rule thing that we have to do.
I'm gonna go back and double check that final rule thing because there's a
It's in
couple
there.
things.
I mean, we've already paid the money to do the leases in York, so I know. I wouldn't do anything that cost money that wasn't in the final rule actually, but the language is in there.
Can you email me that
Mhm.
authoritative language that you're pulling from final rule? Because I did not see that in CFR 44.301. Now it may be somewhere else, but if so, then, we need to figure out where it is and use that as a
It's
standard.
quoted right here in the response.
Right here in the response.
There's nothing wrong with him signing a lease anyway, is it? as long as
I
they're.
don't know. I don't know if it's even, what we're gonna do is go around and get all these leases. And what I'm saying is, there's not gonna be an exchange of money as far as a down payment. The things in South Carolina that are part of a landholder lease agreement may or may not be in place. And I don't know if this is gonna be anything other than some paperwork. And what if they can't afford, like the point was made, what if they're not gonna afford to pay their rent? Nothing's gonna happen to them. So it seems kind of ridiculous, but,
But the rule is right there in the response. It's
Yeah.
quoted in the response. The section of that, setting rule, the 42 CFR. It's written down there as part of the response.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, we'll just resend that page.
Yeah. Send it to me from that actual code. So, page, 10. Okay, I'm trying to figure out what this is now. Individuals have access to food at all times. And Oconee says physical accessibility to kitchen, laundry room, we have doors that stay locked because client has pica. So in that situation, there's gonna need to be a human rights committee, I assume, and individual plans written to say that you can do that. I mean, that's what we used to do in ICS.
That
That's
is the
correct.
same thing here. The comment here is basically, it's not that the rule is gonna change. It's the matter of how you document that person's need for not having access to food. So it's
But you're
basically.
also restricting everybody else who lives in that house.
Yes, and you can, if they don't need that, you can go through the Human Rights Committee and they can have their own key, or they can know the process to get the food. It's not unusual, and it's not really hard to do.
Okay. Now, the one thing I have a problem with this in several ways is that everything on here says, look at the guidelines under individuals have access to food at all times. It says positive interventions and supports must be tried before the modification. Use of less intrusive methods documented and data collected to review the modification. The modification must be time limited, cause no harm. Okay. All throughout here, we're saying documentation that lists, all throughout here is we're saying that we have to have tried before we modify and use. We have to have tried less restrictive interventions or less intrusive methods. Okay, does that mean that we could put in there that we've tried those in the past? We're not going to have to retry those things.
Now, if someone's got a diagnosis of pica, Vicki, it's pretty evident as to what you need to, restrict. Now, if we're talking about pica, Prader-Willi, things that it's medically proven you're going to have to restrict these things, that is the documentation. You can't try something because they'll die. But if you've got somebody that has diabetes, and you're restricting because they can't stop eating all the chocolate or whatever's in the house, personal experience here, you might want to have, your intervention is you're going to do diabetes training and tell people why they shouldn't be eating this stuff. It doesn't mean you stop them from doing it, but it means that you're trying different ways to educate them. But that's really as much as you, Janet, would you agree that's what you have to do?
I agree.
Yeah, it's not that you're going back in the well every single time. You just have to document it's just like an ICF, Vicki. Remember when someone wouldn't go to the dentist? You can't say you're not taking them to the dentist. You have to show how you desensitize them to go into the dentist.
I know, but I mean, it really scares me because I think that staff are going to look at that standard, and somebody with high blood pressure wants to keep a box of salt by their bed and salt it up, that's what's going to happen. And I just think we're going to have some health problems.
I mean, we're taking the documentation exactly out of the regulation, are we not?
We are.
And this is what people should be doing anyway. You should always be doing before the final rule. This was the rule. You do positive interventions before you restrict anybody's rights. It's always been that way. I mean, I'm from the ICF world. It's always been that way.
individuals have access to food at all times was never there.
No, we could not restrict their right. They didn't say it like that, but you still couldn't without qualifying it. We couldn't say you didn't have access to food because we don't want you to have access to the kitchen. It was because, you have high blood pressure and you can't have excess salt. And we had to justify it. Even in the ICF world, we had to justify that.
Well, what we're saying it like, when you put it that way, and it's like, well, we didn't say it like that. And how we say things is so important because people interpret them in so many different ways, so there's gonna have to be.
Well, that's why we're rewriting the residential plan to be able to prompt all those questions you're asking so we don't lose those healthcare concerns because someone doesn't want to do the paperwork. And it's really not hard to do. I mean, the paperwork is what coordinators do. That is their job. When you write a plan, is to ask all those questions. We're prompting every one of those questions on this new plan.
So in the next one, this is lovely. Individuals are able to have visitors of their choosing at any time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Unless it's contraindicated and documented in their plan. So if you have folks that, and one, I don't think this is going to be a big issue. I think I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I think SLP2 might have a bigger issue with it, but not so much the CTHs. However, if it's documented in a plan, although I can think of one thing, that somebody does not know how to choose wisely of good friends out in the community, to put it mildly with some of our folks, that's got to be in their plan. You just have to document why. We can't take the language out because that is the language of the regulation. But we sure as heck can mitigate it on the other side of it.
What regulation? Is that a federal regulation you're
Yes,
saying?
ma'am. That's a CMS regulation. And when we go on the other side of it, that's where as professionals and as family members, we voice our concerns in those plans and we mitigate it properly. I can restrict someone from having visitors whenever they want to if we document why. You
Somebody
just
comes
can't-
selling drugs or something like that,
Right.
yeah.
You can't have, it's just the same rule. I just remember in the day, there was no bedtimes. There's no ICF regs that say people have to be in bed at 6 o'clock. But I have worked in places where, my God, people had their baths at 4, ate their meal at 5, and they were in bed at 6. But because it wasn't the rules that this is better for them to sleep good, have a good night's sleep. It was the staff's rule that they wanted everybody in bed so they can watch TV. This is just saying that people have rights, and if you're going to restrict those rights in any way, you have to document why.
Sounds good to me.
They could have the mind of a 3-year-old or 5 and have somebody do a sleepover in their bedroom. Unless what is your reason going to be that they can't do that?
Because I have someone that didn't have a mind of a 3-year-old. She had a perfectly good mind and a body of a full-grown woman, and she wanted to have sex with everybody that moved. She went to the library, met a guy, gave him her number. She met him at the local motel, and they did have a sleepover, okay? Now, if I'm caring for this person, I would say she makes poor choices as to who her individual sex partners are. She actually has an STD, but she doesn't inform her partner. And so I would have reasons that she would not have a sleepover. And she doesn't have the mind of a 4-year-old. She had the mind of her. I don't know how to put an age on somebody's mind. I find that to be not a good example. But she had the body of a woman, and this is what she wanted to do. However, we had to regulate the fact that she was not bringing anybody home because she did not choose good partners. So that was,
So you
and
just
she puts
documented
other
that with
people
that.
at risk.
Yeah.
Now, if I've got somebody with a mind of a 3-year-old, as you say, they're not going to be asking to have visitors overnight. And if I can justify that they don't make good choices, then I would say that in a plan.
You know, I think that we're going to have more time to look at the authoritative source of this, because I looked at that 441 and there's no mention of a fence in it, a wall in it. You know, some of this
No,
stuff,
that's
I'm
not
not
in
sure
there.
I'm not sure how much of this is South Carolina's interpretation, DDSN's interpretation. I don't know what it is, but I would like to see the actual authoritative source that that these things are based on. Because I think there's all kind of potential for major problems here. And I think that's why boards are writing to Lindsey Graham and Tim Smith and different people, because they're nervous about operating programs. We're going to have to hire extra people just to document why they can't do all the stuff that we're saying they can do in these guidelines. It's just, and all the way through too, it says that, you know, if there's documentation of past unsuccessful experiences due to the limitation of choices, then staff shouldn't have to give them unrestricted freedom again just to demonstrate that they can't handle it. So all here we've got positive interventions and supports must be tried before the modification, use of less intrusive methods documented and data collected to review the modification. And I think that instead of that, it should say, unless there's past documentation to support that this much freedom or this much lack of restriction has been unsuccessful. It doesn't all have to start over with these standards with every person, and that's what it reads. It reads that way.
The problem, you have a yearly plan day document that you have to do, so you've got to revisit this stuff at least on an annual basis. But, you know, to take that point one further, what we're saying is you're totally defined by your past history. We do have people that learn and can move forward and do things better. If we say that, oh, if you've done this in the past, you can never, we're never going to have to redocument this, reassess it, revisit it, because you're bound to do it again. That's not very fair to the people who can learn and move on.
But it's real risky to make, you know, to not take that into consideration when you agree.
It's not that you don't take it into consideration, but you have to revisit it on a minimal of an annual basis. We have to do that with everything. You know, that's not a new standard. We have always had to reassess at a minimum annually, or when a change occurs, or when somebody learns a skill, or when somebody loses a skill. Those are the 4 reasons that you do an assessment. That's always been, I mean, that goes back to my ICF days, and ever since I've been teaching active treatment, that's what I say. So what we're trying to say is that people do learn things, and it can change what they can and cannot decide. But if we were to say that we don't, okay, once you've established that, other than a medical diagnosis like pica or Prader-Willi, a Prader-Willi person is always going to want to have food, and they're always going to eat until they explode their stomach. It's just what happens. It's what Prader-Willi is. So you do have to limit access to food. Can some people live without locks? Yes, and they've done it successfully, but over a lot of training. Now, someone who has pica, true pica, not that one time a long time ago they ate a leaf, because we've done that to people too. We should be able to look through their plan and say, they haven't done this in years. We have people on behavior support plans who haven't had an aggressive behavior in 10 years, but because they had a history of aggressive behaviors, they are now on psychotropic drugs for the rest of their lives and BSPs for the rest of their lives. And that's the kind of thought process that needs to change. People do grow, they learn, they become different. Not everybody, but some do. That's why you have to at least say annually, you're looking at their stuff.
Well, I'm not happy with the way, it just doesn't suit me the way this wording is in here. I think it's taking unnecessary risks. All of it is. The visitor thing is I can go to bed whenever I want to thing. I mean, they're gonna stay up all night and not go to work the next morning or not go to the day program the next morning. I mean, it's just like, we're not taking any of their past behaviors really into consideration, assuming, operating under the fact that we're going to train them out of,
No, but we can't tell people go to bed now. I can't say go to bed. If they want to watch TV all night, they can. I can't go in there and shut their TV off and tell them to go to bed. They'll have the natural consequences of that. All of us have stayed up too late binge watching something, and we pay the natural consequences, and they have to do that too. We can't turn that TV off now.
No, I mean, they
I
can,
agree with that.
they can, they can lay in bed and have, you know, when you have one staff member on and 4 people on CTH and everybody wants different meal times, how's that gonna work out?
You put it in the microwave or in the refrigerator and say you have it when you're ready to go. What family? There's some families that get to eat all at the same time, and then there's other families who, because of schedules or this or preference, they can't. And so you wrap it up, stick it in the refrigerator, and say, well, when you want it, go throw it in the microwave. Or if you don't want that, here's a substitute. You can have a sandwich or a bowl of cereal. You can do that. You can do that now. You should be doing that now. That is not a new thing. Not everybody in the CTH eats at the same time. And we can't make them.
And so people that can have people over whenever they want to, we don't want to stay in the common areas or anything like that. We're gonna let them go wherever, like in the bedroom,
Well, that's their bedroom. That's what they're paying for.
no matter what they bring in to go into their bedroom with them.
No, I think that people have to have some common sense, and that is why you have a plan. If people bring home those kind of folks, then obviously they've had a history of making poor choices, and you write that in their plan. And then,
Well,
yes.
I don't think these standards have any common sense. I mean, I just don't.
They're just giving people rights is what they're doing. I mean, they're
Well,
giving people rights.
It's full,
They don't
yeah,
have the choice
all
to
the
give
way
people
through.
rights.
All the way through here, it talks about rights. I don't see anything talking about responsibility that they may or may not be able to accept.
There's absolutely, in all these rules, there's absolutely nothing new. There's nothing new that we have not been doing all along. And we are looking at these, I mean, we should have been protecting people's rights all along. The reason they're being put down in black and white is because across the country, people have not been respecting people's rights. And that's why the advocacy groups got together and pushed, I think this was in response to a lawsuit actually, the final rule to say that you're gonna have to write it down that we get to have rights. And that you don't get to tell me I have to eat at 6 o'clock because that's when you're cooking for all the people in the group home. If I want my dinner at 8 o'clock, I get to have it at 8 o'clock. I mean, it really is. Unfortunately, it should never have had to be done in black and white. It's intuitive that people have rights, but obviously not enough people understand that. But I've had people, 89 didn't want to eat at the same time. We wrapped their stuff up and put it in the refrigerator and heated it up later for them. Yes, we did.
Lori, let me ask Lori a question. Lori, are you comfortable that we have the authoritative source that these are based on? Are you comfortable that this is a reflection? You've read those and this is a reflection of those?
I think so. I mean, if I were giving you a legal opinion, I'd want to go back and read everything again, but I think we're on solid ground. I think there's a lot in the interpretation, Vicki, that we just need to be mindful of, that we're not being more restrictive than necessary.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you want to be more restrictive.
I mean, I do want to go back and look at
We can table this and you can read it one more time.
Yeah, that would be.
That'll be fine.
I want to see
Are we under a time constraint? Can we table it and wait till the next month?
Well, we're under a time constraint, but I'd rather have it be done correctly and with everybody feeling comfortable doing it than to push. But Alliance got, they've got their, they need the licensing standards by which to license people. And, but I still, bottom line is, the commission needs to come out and support the final rule implementation. So I need y'all to feel comfortable with it. And if you're not comfortable with it, then let's go back to the table and understand it better. But it's really just, again, like I said, unfortunately, when you have to codify hearts and minds to do the right thing for people, it gets very wordy and burdensome. But there's nothing in these final rules. The only thing that I've ever fought against, it wasn't about the lock fence, as long as I could mitigate it in a plan. What I always fought against was when they were talking about the co-location, that we had too many houses together. And I went to Lindsey Graham and I went to Washington to do it, to sit there and talk to them about grandfather these properties in, because what was built in 1970, they were not the 70s, the 80s, were places that we just had land given to us and we just put them where we could because we had no money. So you need a grandfather to have properties in, but that was my only, I didn't have heartburn over.
When you say, I've got to go to another meeting, Mary, and I appreciate what you're saying. If we could look at some of the ways the other states are addressing these in their standards, and at some of the actual standards themselves, because it looks like to me, like I said, I read 441 this morning, there's no mention of a fence in it. And we've got it in our day and residential standards. I don't know what that's
What we're
about.
saying is, no, go ahead, Jeremy, you do it better than I do.
Well,
I want to see where it says in the CMS standards that you can't have a fence.
it doesn't. It does
Right.
not say that. What
Right.
it says is that there are certain settings that are presumed to have qualities of an institution.
Right.
And then there is one of those categories that the state has defined, and the state, meaning DHHS, has defined. And that's
Yep.
when we're talking about 2 CRCFs that used to be ICFs, property that is completely surrounded by a
Well,
log fence.
the state HHS can define it any way they want to, but there shouldn't be any confusion about whose job it is to set standards. And I'm not going to vote for that because I don't believe that that's right. And so what I think we need to do is have just a little bit more information about what the actual federal standards say and about how maybe some of these other states are meeting it. But their Alliant does have standards to survey by. Nobody has pulled the
No, they're
existing
still in effect.
standards.
We're still using them.
Right.
And I guess, again, the state statute does not say a fence per se. They're saying, if you had to pick items that would make something look institutional, what would they be? So a building that is surrounded by a locked fence that stops people from coming and going is presumed to be institutional, like around a jail per se, or a psychiatric institution. That's what they're saying. That's why they picked a locked fence. They're not picking a low picket fence where you have a cute little gate that opens and closes. That's not what they're picking on. They're picking on a big old fence that goes around and the people need to go get somebody to give them a key to get out. Now, a locked fence around a day program that's only locked at night, that's not it. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, and if you've got people who elope and you need to lock that fence for a reason, then you mitigate that issue because it's a safety issue. In York, I've got one that's wrapped around a house because it's sitting on a very busy road, and I've got someone who elopes. The fence is not locked until there's an emergency, and then the staff carry fobs, but there's a walk-through gate on the other side that doesn't even have a gate on it. So
I
there's ways to
understand what you're
mitigate it.
saying. I understand what you're saying. I appreciate what you're saying. And entirely disagree that we need to give people more choice. I think our approach to it needs to be improved. I think we're taking a lot of risks, and ultimately the commission is responsible. So, I would like to see the actual CMS data, and whether or not we agree with what the state's definitions are is yet to be seen. So we'll just have to take it from there. But it's 2:03. I'm late to another meeting. Thank you all for coming. We are adjourned.